to avoid repeating what I said yesterday. So I should say some precaution. So today's topic is in a way a continuation of yesterday's discussion. Yesterday the topic was related to the natural conflict that we face in our everyday life. The moment you try to start something new in your life, something positive, and this is much more true when you turn to spiritual life, there's always a conflict between what we want to do and what our mind allows us to do, or what we eventually end up doing. Because we should remember, we all live 90%, 95% of our life, we live at the mental world, at the mental level, not the intellectual level. That's very important. If we could always do what we want to do, there will be absolutely no problems in the world. There will be no Hitlers or Stalins or Genghis Khans, absolutely no violence, nothing evil in this world. So, why this conflict? Now here, keeping in mind what I said yesterday, I should bring you to the next level of discussion. And one point to remember is, psychological problems or mental problems have no permanent solution at psychological level or mental level. The first principle. You know, a doctor cannot be a patient. The doctor treating a patient should know what the disease is, and he should have a healthy mind to be able to treat the patient properly. So if you really want to stabilize your mind, turn your mind into your friend, into your guide, into your philosopher, a helpmate in your life, then that mind should be lifted above the mental level. I shall try to explain this in the light of a very interesting imagery in one of our ancient scriptures. Surprisingly, many of these ancient Vedanta scriptures give a very interesting, very telling explanations of many of these problems we face in this 21st century. In the Kathopanishad, which comes in the Krishna Yajurveda Samhita tradition, the Upanishad tradition, there is a very wonderful imagery where our life is compared to a journey on a chariot. Now, when you travel in a chariot, you are the one who is traveling. You need a driver who drives the chariot, and the charioteer, the driver of the chariot, needs horses, and he should be able to control the horses with his reins, which should be steady in his hands. So think of the journey, think of the whole journey as a whole. You should first of all get a good, reliable driver. And the driver should have steady hands. You should not be drunk. So, and he should be able to control the horses, holding the reins in his hands firmly. And if you are a very intelligent person, you will certainly get a good intelligent driver, reliable person. And if the driver is a good reliable person, his hands will be steady when he controls the horses with his reins. Now compare this to our life as a whole. We are travelers, and our intellect is the driver. And what are the horses? Horses are the senses. The senses take the mind in diverse directions. And mind is the reins with which the driver controls the horses. And what the road is this life, this world, this life of sensory experiences. What we see, what we hear, what we experience, which produce happiness and unhappiness, pain and pleasure. These constitute the road that we have to take. If the horses are properly controlled by the driver with the reins in his hands, then you will reach your destination. Otherwise, if the horses are allowed to assert their freedom, to take you wherever they want, you may end up run off a precipice and you may end up in the ICU. Or you reach your destination. Life is like that. What's a friendly mind? And how does the mind become your enemy? When your mind listens to the horses, then your mind is your worst enemy. When the mind listens to the driver, then it becomes friendly. So there are two ways in which the horses could move. One direction, the natural direction, mind is always flowing outward towards various sense objects. Mind and eyes together take us to various visual objects. Mind and ears together take us to various audio objects. And also all the five senses, the sense of touch, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, the sense of sight and the sense of hearing. All these five senses are outlets or doors entering the outside world. Now, mind has a natural tendency to be projected outward. It's all right, mind can certainly be turned outward, but mind should be controlled by somebody other than the mind, who is superior to mind, who is more stable, and the mind should be controlled by the intellect, and the intellect itself is not always reliable, You see, today I may be attracted towards something, I may consider a book very wonderful, tomorrow I may be disappointed. So even what your intellect brings to you, the intellectual food that you get may not always be permanently satisfactory. So even intellect is not always steady. But there is something beyond the intellect which is steadiness itself. Vedanta says it is Atman, the self, the soul. So there are two ways in which the mind can move. Normally, mind has a natural nasty tendency always to be projected outward. Again, there is the verse in the Kathopanishad for those, so if you are interested, Atmanam Ridhinam Vidhi Shariram Rathamevaja Buddhintu Saradim Vidhi Mana Pragrahamevaja Indriyani Paranyahu Vishayans Tesu Gojaran Atmendriya Mano Yuktam Bhokti Tyakun Manishinaga. I'm just quoting the verse for those who are interested, but even if you don't bother about these verses, you won't lose anything. I am trying to explain, give a very freelance explanation of this. It is nothing but the description of human life as a journey on a chariot, where your friendly mind helps you in your journey, and an unfriendly mind takes you over the precipice. Now, in one of our most profound Vedanta scriptures, there is a very interesting description of how the mind becomes your worst enemy and your murderer. That's the thing. You may be surprised, shocked at this explanation. Shankaracharya in the Viveka Chudamani gives a very interesting verse. Sabdadivi panjabhireva panja panjattu mapusa gunena baddhaha kuranga madanga padanga meenaha Bhringa Nara Panjabhiranchitakim. This is a verse. I should give a extended explanation. You know, 5 animals or creatures are mentioned here. The deer, the elephant, the moth, and then the fish, and small insects that move from flowers to flower, sipping honey in the garden. 5 animals. Now the great philosopher says, you know, how in ancient times the hunters used to hunt deers. What they used to do, they will play a flute, they will play musical instrument. Listening to this music, these deers hiding in a bush or a cave will come out of the cave, and at that time the hunter will release an arrow, it will be killed. So what was the cause of death for the deer? Is infatuation with his sight, with the sense of sound. It was trapped by the sense of hearing. He came out and was killed. Now the great philosopher says, human beings at all times, every moment, are trapped by the sense attraction. The next animal is, you know, elephant. If the sense of hearing becomes a trap for the deer, sense of touch becomes a trap for the elephant. You know, elephants, they move in groups, in herds, and they touch each other. The mother elephant will be holding the tiny baby elephant, and they fall into a pit. They are trapped or killed or enslaved for life. So the sense of touch becomes a trap, the cause of death for the elephant. And what about the moth? These tiny flies, insects which emerge in large numbers during rainy season in the tropical countries. So people start a fire to kill them. So these little insects, they are trapped by the brilliant color of the blazing fire. They think something very attractive. They fly towards them and they are killed and burnt. And then what about fish? So if the moths, they are attracted, trapped by the sense of sight, the fish are trapped by the sense of taste. They eat the bait and they are hooked and they are killed. And then the small tiny creatures that move in the garden, flying from flowers to flowers, you know, they are trapped and killed by other bigger insects which hunt these creatures, because a sense of smell becomes the cause of its death. No, the final exclamation of this philosopher is Nara Panjabhiranchidakim. What to speak of human beings? Every moment, every split second, these 5 senses are dragging our mind towards their sense objects. So what happens? They take our mind away from its focus. The illustration, the imagery of journey on a chariot tells us, it is fine, but somebody other than the senses should control the senses. That should be the mind. And what kind of mind? Mind cannot control the senses. Mind is totally incapable of controlling the senses. Mind should be linked to something other than mind. That's why I said, you know, psychological problems cannot have permanent solution at the psychological level. You ask any modern psychiatrist, they won't make this declaration in the American Psychiatric Association meeting contest, because they can't do that. But most of the problems in their advanced conditions cannot have permanent solution. Drugs, counseling can postpone or reduce the intensity of the problem, cannot completely, permanently solve the problem. But problems can be solved. Psychological problems can be solved at the spiritual level. All psychological problems can be solved at the spiritual level. Now, I can give this example. How to lift the mind above itself. How to ascend the mind, take it beyond mental level. That's a subject. Now, it's like, suppose a small stream is dry, it has no water. You link it to a lake and then it gets a permanent, perennial supply of water. So mind should be linked to something which is always healthy. Mind is changing all the time. As I mentioned yesterday, you cannot program your mind. We can more or less decide what physical action we are going to do next day or next moment. But you cannot really decide what thoughts are going to emerge in your mind, what thought you are going to think next moment. Absolutely impossible. So, how to program the mind? Mind should be linked to something which is stable, which is healthy. Mind should be linked to Atman. Now, what is Atman? That is a spiritual question, it's a philosophical question, it's also a psychological question. Atman is, when you bring in religion, we often bring in a God sitting above the clouds with a long list of those who are destined to go marching towards hell, and other list of people going to heaven, or maybe a God who divides humanity into believers and non-believers, and a God who is happy when you accept Him, a God who is terribly unhappy if you are not willing to accept Him. That's the kind of idea we normally have. Vedanta doesn't say this idea is wrong, but Vedanta tells you there is a higher idea. As we evolve in our own spiritual life, our idea of the absolute spiritual reality also undergoes evolution. And at the highest level, we think of God as a divine spiritual reality present everywhere, present in everything. So this Atman in Vedanta is explained as something which is beyond changes, which is always stable, which is always serene. So mental health is not something you have to acquire. Mental health is something that you have to discover within yourself. It is already there. In fact, unhealth or ill health or sickness is a result of any foreign body in the physical system, as you know. So also instability, anxiety, or extreme obsession, all these are alien to our real nature. We have a nature, we have a personality that goes beyond our psychophysical personality, beyond the physical, beyond the mental, beyond the intellectual. At the physical level, mental level, intellectual level, there are changes, there is always an element of instability. But there is a level where there is no change, it's always stable. That is Atman. It is unchanging, it is eternal, it is everlasting, and it is our true nature. This is the Vedantic perspective. So, if we can sometimes look upon ourselves or define ourselves as something that goes beyond mind and body and intellect, psychophysical mechanism, something transcendental, and if we can identify ourselves with that, then we will be able to watch our own life as you are watching a drama being played out on the stage. In fact, the whole concept of mindfulness in its original Buddhist tradition is rooted in this idea. It is called Sthiti Upasthana Sutram, is a Sanskrit version of Buddha's original dialogue, which is in Pali called Sati Upasthana Sutta. So it is a long discourse that Buddha gave on the natural permanent state of mental awareness. When you are aware of your true identity, that is beyond mind, then what happens? You can live in this world, you can live a wonderful life, you can active 24 hours of the day, 7 days of the week, still you can remain mentally detached from all the anxieties and burden and problems of your actions. Be active, at the same time, be a spectator, not a participant. This is the only way to turn your mind to your friend and not to an enemy. This is a very interesting thing. Now, it doesn't mean indifference. I know any management student will tell you, if you remain detached from what you are doing, then you won't be able to focus on the work, on the result, the expectations, the anticipated results. Not at all. With full commitment, with full dedication, we should do our duty. At the same time, we should be able to mentally detach ourselves from this. We are a non-participating agent in the whole drama of human life. This is the Buddhist view. I shall try to take the same, to take you to the same idea from, through another route. One important way of turning our mind into our best friend is to have a noble, wonderful ideal in front of us. Because when you have a higher ideal for which we always strive, we work hard for realizing that ideal, then what happens? Distractions and dissipations of mental energy resources can be reduced, and your whole energy resources can be disciplined and organized and focused in one direction. I can explain this in the light of a very interesting story and also a part of history from one of our Hindu classical tradition. You must have heard of Bhagavata Purana. It is the most important devotional classic of Vedantic tradition, Hindu tradition. It has got 18,000 verses, considered to be a sacred book in the mainstream Hindu tradition. It is something like, the most profound, philosophically, spiritually, and from a devotional point of view, the most profound work in the devotional tradition, in the traditional devotional philosophy of Hinduism. You know, its author was Vyasa. And who was Vyasa? Vyasa was the most accomplished scholar of ancient times in India. He is the author, he is the one who edited the whole 4 Vedas. The whole Veda was edited into 4 sections. He wrote Brahma Sutras. Well, even the Bhagavad Gita that we discussed, it is his creation. It comes from Mahabharata, 145,000 verses, larger version. It's a huge work. It's said to be 14 times as big as Homer's Iliad, Odyssey, and Virgil's Aeneid, the great Latin classic put together. 14 times as big. The size of the book. And Vyasa is the mighty philosopher, saint and sage, and a thinker of ancient times. This Vyasa was terribly depressed. That's how the story. His mind was not his friend. At least after achieving so much, the most reputed, the most famous author, philosopher, saint of his times, he was perfectly happy once upon a time, but somehow, towards the end of his life, he became completely depressed. And one day, he was sitting on the bank of a river, and he was brooding over his fate. In fact, all his disciples had become more famous than him. And this great sage and philosopher and author, he was not happy. So another saint appeared there and asked him this question, what's the matter with you? You are the most accomplished man. So much of reputation, great name and great respect from everyone. Still he was unhappy. How is it possible for one to be unhappy? You have heard of Buddha. Buddha was unhappy. But that unhappiness made him the greatest spiritual teacher of his time. Buddha was born in a palace. He was the son of a king. He was not allowed to see the darker side of human life. And one day he was being taken on a chariot in the city of the capital city of his kingdom, and then he saw a procession, a dead body taken to the cremation ground. He saw the face of a sick man, an old man. So the dark realities of life, old age, death and sickness, it terribly made him terribly unhappy. So he wanted to know the answer for this problem. And that night he left his kingdom, his comforts, walked 1200 miles and reached Buddha Gaya and sat under a tree with a strong vow, strong determination. That determination is put in the ancient 2nd century classic, is a biography of Buddha's life in Sanskrit. Lilita Vistara it is called. Ikasane sushudu me shariram tugasti mamsam cha vilayam chayathu aprapi siddhim bhujanma durlabham naivasanat kaya matas charishyati. This is the great determination. I am going to sit under this tree, I am going to meditate, let me die, let my body turn into bones and marrow and flesh, let me perish. I won't get up from this seat till I realize the highest spiritual goal. And he became Buddha. What made him walk 1200 miles from his capital city, giving up his palace, his comforts, his kingdom? Because he was unhappy. What made him unhappy? If you can feel unhappy, even when you have no material problem, you are a great person. You are on the way to greatness. See, if we have everything going on well for us, plenty of money, bank balance, great friends, great job, still you are not really happy, you feel a kind of inner emptiness. That is a sign of higher evolution in our spiritual ability. Only some highly evolved persons will have that feeling of divine discontent, kind of inner dissatisfaction, in spite of having no need, no desire at the material level. That means higher spiritual goal. Anyway, this was Vyasa's condition. So Narada told him, why are you unhappy? So Vyasa told, I wrote these wonderful books. I taught these great saints and sages, and I have a great reputation. But still, I don't really feel I have that inner fulfillment, the completeness. That kind of feeling empty within, even when you do not have any material need, is possible only for higher people. So very often, if we can sublimate our smaller psychological problems to spiritual inquisitiveness, spiritual problems, you find these problems do not exist. That's what exactly Vyasa did. So Narada told him, you wrote these wonderful books, Mahabharata, the great classics you wrote, and you are discussing only constitution, dharma. Dharma understood in Vedantic tradition means do's and don'ts. You should behave in a particular manner, you should not do certain things, and you should do certain things. So you gave wonderful rules and regulations for human life. It's just like constitution or the principles of economics or science and technology. These are all existing regulating principles of human life called dharma in Vedanta tradition, different from dharma as understood in Buddhist tradition. So Narada told him that's not a big deal. He was putting in American language. You wrote these wonderful books. Did you teach humanity something by following which, by understanding? Did you teach them something that helped them in their spiritual bone, that will give them a kind of inner contentment, inner fulfillment, inner happiness? A feeling, well, I have got something which is sacred. I do not have to strive for anything higher than this. That is what is called real contentment. Then your mind becomes your friend. When you do certain things and you get a feeling, a kind of inner fulfillment, well, I have done this. I have achieved this. Beyond this, I don't have to attain anything. If a little bit of that real contentment is experienced in our heart, then mind becomes your best friend. There is a point when mind actually becomes your guide. Sri Ramakrishna says, when your mind is your friend, it becomes your guru. When you show a tendency to go out of the way, mind will give you a red signal. Don't go this way. And if you can follow these instructions of the mind will actually take you in the right direction. But if you forcibly don't follow the instructions of this inner voice coming from within, then mind will stop giving this red signal. Mind will rather cooperate with you even in your undesirable deeds. Because mind gets colored, mind gets influenced by the tendencies that we create through our actions. If we can create good tendencies, those tendencies will constitute the personality of the mind, and mind will take us in the proper direction. Here, the great sage Narada was guiding Vyasa along that route. So Narada told him, you should do something that will be helpful to others. Then your mind will be a friend. Just telling them, teaching them what to do is not enough. You should give them something. You should present before them an ideal. And that will inspire them. That should inspire them. That should help them in their inner life. Once you give this help, that will help them in their inner life, then you will be helped. Your mind will become your friend. And after listening to Narada, Vyasa wrote this book, Bhagavata Purana. Now, Bhagavata Purana is a great classical work which inspired and which guided so many great saints and sages and devotees. Even now, millions of people in India read these books, millions, and get spiritual solace and inspiration. Just reading a few verses, they feel, oh, very wonderful. We have done something sacred. So this is one important point, doing something that's good for others. Second point, and that's very important, is for mental health, is a sense of sacredness and sanctity. And now, this is a very interesting thing. You know, most of the problems of mental ill health in modern times are rooted in the collapse of family structure and the fragmentation of human mind, the obsession with the science and technology oriented educational system, which doesn't give any training, which doesn't give any food to human emotions, doesn't give any training to your attitudes, your emotions, your feelings. That kind of educational system is one of the byproducts of the collapse of the structure of family life. In human relations, you know, the primacy of emotions, in fact, William James, his great contribution to modern psychology. He lived, it was the beginning of 20th century and it was the end of 19th century, varieties of religious experience and many books he wrote. But one very important contribution he made to modern psychology, when psychology, unfortunately even today, it is a laboratory oriented technology. If you have a problem, you take medicine. It's just like treating an animal, really speaking. Or just when if you have a problem, if there's a famine, there's not enough, enough rainfall, you start forestation. Your deforestation causes the stop of, decline in rainfall and famine, starvation, all these problems. Like that, we are dealing with human minds, human emotions. So an educational system which starves the human emotions, which doesn't feed human emotions, which can only create machines, morons, or madmen. Because when emotions and feelings are not trained or refined, not given any kind of positive orientation, the first casualty will be human mind. Psychological health will be the first casualty. Now, this is one of the distant byproducts of the loss of a sense of sanctity and sacredness of human relations. So Vedanta gives you a very interesting solution to this. See, let us say the relationship between child and mother, brother and sister, husband and wife, and different, I need not go into details. When human relationship is mechanical, if it becomes a truly mechanical, money-oriented, dollar-oriented, give and take contract affair, then emotions and feelings will be natural, will become impoverished. A sense of sanctity and sacredness will help you to feed, to spiritually enrich the attitudes and emotions. See, when you do something as an act, as a sacred act, even if it involves a lot of pains, lot of problems, you can avoid the pitfalls, the traps of skepticism, doubts, and also a kind of a questioning attitude rooted in intellectual arrogance. I can underline this. There are two types of questioning attitudes. One, inquisitiveness, to know more. The other one is like a rotating wheel. We go on asking questions, we don't worry about the answers. So very often, when you bringing a sense of sanctity and sacredness to human relations, a lot of psychological problems which actually antagonize our mind against ourselves, turning our mind into our worst enemy, can be avoided. Because sacredness and sanctity gives a spiritual orientation to whatever we do. Now, this is possible not only in spiritual life. That's what I want to emphasize now. These spiritual values are not necessarily meant for monks or hermits living in forests. In fact, this tradition of Vedantic tradition was encouraged, was enriched, and was preserved by a long lineage of big executives in India. You know executive? It's called Rajarshi. There is a word used in Bhagavad Gita, Rajarshi. Shankara Rajanasya Rishesha Rajarsheka. A person who is a king and also is a saint. How to roll the characteristics of a king and a saint into one single personality? You can be active, you can be efficient, you should be dedicated, you should be result oriented, you can have wonderful organizational skills, leadership skills. All these qualities can go along with the calm, quiet attitude of a contemplative person. So action and contemplation rolled into one. So that's a unique concept that you find in Vedanta psychology. It is called Rajarshi. In fact, to drive home this idea, I have to again quote you an ancient scripture. These great commentators have thrown wonderful flashlight into the deeper psychology of Vedanta. He says, Rajanascha Rishiyascha Rajasya. Those who are kings and also saints, that means rolling the efficiency and enthusiasm, the work orientation of an administrator or a CEO, and the calm contemplative nature of a saint into one. This is the meaning. Now one of the commentators, this is Shankaracharya's Bhashya, one of the commentators on Shankaracharya's commentary, Shankarananda Saraswati, he gives a beautiful, very profound interpretation of this. It comes very close to Plato's philosopher king ideal republic. Plato, you find Plato represents a distant echo of this ancient, much more ancient concept. In this commentary, the philosopher says, Rajattum Aishwarya Sambhati Rishittum Tasyaha Sukshmartha Darsana Kshamatvam. What is the status of a king? A king will have all the best things of this world. Prosperity, success. Success is a big problem. Success can be a very serious problem. If you want any proof, you can read, you'll find the most successful perfectionist societies like Sweden, Holland, Switzerland, and Japan above all. In Japan, a child is taken care of from cradle to grave. And Medicare, education, everything wonderful. And the largest percentage of patients are free from depression, and the highest percentage of suicide in Japan. Along with this prosperity, along with this perfectionism, everything. If the train's 10 seconds late, they give a public apology in newspapers. Yes. But that kind of thing with the highest suicide rates and also depression. So you find a kind of inner emptiness along with that. So now, the commentator says, you can have all the best things of this world. But in order to enjoy the good things you have attained, in order to retain, to sustain the psychological health of the mind, to enjoy the fruits of your own labor, your own achievements, you should be able to understand the limitations of material success. You can have all the best things of this world. You can aim at material success. But you should also remember the limitations of prosperity, success, profits, everything. Then you can have this. So there's a very interesting combination. You try to be prosperous, but keep in mind that prosperity cannot give you lasting peace. Once you keep that in mind, then the advantage is you can retain your psychological health to enjoy the fruits of prosperity and success. So this harmonious synthesis, without any friction, this harmonious synthesis of the best of this world and the best of the spiritual, best of material and the best of the spiritual. This is the ideal of Rajarshi ideal as mentioned in Gita. So what it means is, we must have all the best things of the world. You cannot preach a kind of over asceticism in this 21st century. But when we talk about the need for material prosperity, which is something that you cannot run away from, because you cannot run away from the fulfillment of needs for the common man. But at the same time, once we understand the limitation of this success as we understand in the empirical sense, once we understand its limitation, we will be able to make use of that success. We will be able to enjoy the fruits of that success. In fact, that is the only way we can achieve spiritual success. In the traditional scriptures, there is a harmonious synthesis. I shall finish this. It's a bit religious. As I often mention, religious doesn't mean you are thinking of a God with a stick in his hand sitting above the clouds. Here, when we talk about religion, we are talking about universal spirituality, based on the idea that God is not in a place of worship. God is present within all of us. God as the divine reality, which is universal, which is immanent, which is omnipresent, and which is transcendental reality. Now, when we do our work, when we make our own effort, then you find something else happens in our life. I can conclude this with an illustration from a Christian mystical tradition, maybe much more obvious than from Sanskrit traditions. The Saint Teresa of Avila's writings, there is a very interesting synthesis, concept of harmonious synthesis of our effort and God's grace. How mind becomes our friend. We have to make our own effort. When we make our effort, mind becomes our friend. And mind becomes capable of, mind attains a higher faculty to enjoy the fruits of God's grace. So coming to the illustration, a gardener is trying to irrigate a field. But the field is full of stones, weeds, grass, pebbles, and so many things. Thistles and unnecessary growth. So before he irrigates the field, he should make the field ready for irrigation. He should remove all the stones, weeds and grass. Then only irrigation will be useful. Even if it starts raining and if the field is not ready, grass will grow. Sowing the seeds won't be useful, won't produce any result. So he should first of all give up his lethargy, do some positive work, and give up the weeds and grass, everything, from the field. And then he can irrigate. And if it starts raining, then it is like God's grace. Like that, in our own life, doing our work without skepticism, with a sense of sanctity, will help us to turn our mind into a friend. I know in modern times, people ask this question about anxiety. Second subject we are going to discuss this evening. Anxiety, worry about the result, stress, all these things are there, no doubt. But the point is, once we start looking upon our duty from a different perspective, then the stress and anxiety, all these problems associated with duty consciousness will be reduced. So in the Vedantic tradition, Vedanta psychology, there is a gradual evolution of how we interpret the work we are doing. It could be any kind of work. You may be a professor, you may be a doctor, you may be teaching in a university, whatever may be the work. We must have a different interpretation of work. It's not Kantian concept of perfectionism as such, because Kant's problem was he perhaps did not recognize a link between perfect duty consciousness and its result on our mind. So duty was interpreted as an obligation on the part of the citizen. It's certainly a great ideal from the standpoint of social and national obligations and responsibilities. But what we do will create an impact on our mental system. We cannot do anything without that work influencing our mind. Just as our mind influences the way we do things, so also what we do also influences the way our mind functions. So there's an evolution. The beginning of our life, normally, is an ideal for us. We should do work with perfect sense of duty, consciousness, responsibility, obligation, etc. All these things. And then we may also spend some time for spiritual practices. So there is always a distinction between work and worship. maybe we may work for 13, 14 hours a day, and then we may spend 2 hours altogether, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, we may spend for reading scriptures or contemplation or discussion of spiritual topics. That's fine. That's how we begin. That the second level, this higher level, where work as worship. Now, if we can look upon our duties, our obligations and work as something more than just a mechanical obligation on our part, as I mentioned, the element of sacredness. The element of sacredness plays a very important role. It can lead to fanaticism, as happens in many religious traditions. That's true. You know, even changing one comma from a scripture is blasphemy or terrible things. Such ideas are there. That is an extreme view which I am not going to deal with right now. What I want to tell you is, whatever we do, whatever our relationship may be with others, you bring in an element of sacredness or sanctity into it. Not in the religious sense, but it is something sacred. It need not be attached to some obvious tangible profits or results. It is great in itself. It is so work as worship. So work and worship, then work as worship. And if you read the lives of great spiritual teachers the world has produced, you'll be surprised the amount of work they did. Yesterday I was talking about Shankaracharya. What all he did, it is difficult to give a long list, so I won't give the list. If you are interested, you can read Sister Nivedita's. Swami Vivekananda's greatest Western disciple was Miss Margaret Noble, who was an Irish revolutionary and a teacher, who became a great disciple of Swami Vivekananda and a great Vedantin. She writes long paragraphs. At the end of her description, she writes, "This is a greatness that we can only appreciate from a distance but can never understand." Now you find Swami Vivekananda, you find Jesus Christ, you find many great men, how much work they could do. Still they remain healthy, physically also they remain healthy and mentally. Because when they did all this work, they did as something sacred, as something. A mother never gets tired of loving her child. Or when you do something with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, a lot of energy, a lot of focus is there, and also it doesn't exhaust you. So if we can bring in an element of sanctity and sacredness into human relations, and even into the field of our ordinary duties and performance of obligations, it also can help us to make our mind our best friend. And one sign that your mind becoming is friendly with you is you feel a kind of inner tranquility and peace. Even you will be able to do wonderful things without ever thinking about the result, the profit, or the expectations attached to that work. So the work begins there, ends there as a worship. Now when this happens, you feel a kind of inner tranquility, inner peace. In Sanskrit there are two words used to explain this. One is kritarthada, as I mentioned, and is kritakrityada. It means, well, I have done what I should have done. When you feel this, you may call it contentment, but it is something very precious. The richest man is never happy because he doesn't feel he has enough. A person not very rich but has enough feels happy because it's not because he has a lot of money, because he has given something else as his, he looks upon something higher as his primary idea. There is a reprioritization happening. Our priority changes. Our priority begins to include something higher than what is empirically within our range, something that gives us some tangible result in the form of a profit or happiness or sensual enjoyment, whatever it is. Beyond that, when we look for something as a higher goal, then there is a prioritization takes place. You feel, oh, these things are okay, but there is something higher to look for. So when you look upon everything from this higher perspective, smaller problems at the empirical world doesn't bother you. And the mind actually becomes a kind of, mind experiences kind of inner calmness and tranquility and peace. So, this is a very broad topic. You can go on from different perspective, from yoga, Vedanta, modern psychological perspective. I have tried to give some ideas, present before you, some ideas. Perhaps you can ask questions if you want. I can clarify some of the points that I may have just briefly touched upon. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Swami. It was a wonderful follow-on and a standalone by itself, actually, conversation or a discussion today. And since I mentioned conversation, that means a two-way, exchange of thoughts and ideas. So if you have any questions, now is the time. And also, I just want to mention while you're thinking of questions, I did want to thank Professor Param for arranging to host us here today at Roland Wallace, and we hope to have more events here with him and expand this engagement. And also I want to thank, of course, Swamiji and all of you who are here today. We are our next event big event will be in August. Swami Tattomoyananda ji will be here, and we're also planning some volunteering events over the summer with some organizations that's in planning. And any other announcement? Was that? Oh yeah, we are a non-profit organization, so we don't of course charge anything. But if you would like to make a small donation, there's a box, and you can make and there are cookies and water. And again, if there are any questions at this point, please feel free to ask. There is do you want me to talk about the event this evening, or there's an informal gathering?
Yeah, it's informal. It's a small place, so if you want to come, let us know.
Please let the folks who are hosting know, which is Sulekadi, and so there will be food and discussions. So there aren't that many people here, so even if everybody is here,
everybody over here is probably going to be there. So, but it would be like part 3.
Yeah, it would be like a part 3.
Yeah.
It's a more, I guess.
More interactive.
More, yeah. So it's in Sulekadi's house in Rocky River. So, but having said that, any questions? Please.
Swamiji, for me, the discipline is the main problem. How do I discipline myself?
Yeah, if you can connect yourself to some single higher idea. If indiscipline is a very serious problem, then you should have something to do, something other than your duty, something that doesn't give you any benefits in return. That's one way of bringing in some other element into the mental system, something higher. So, discipline in a way means dissipation or distraction of energy, interest and focus. So they should be brought together in one direction. So that you should start working for something. And that should not be part of your job. That should not be part of anything that gives you anything in return. If you can really do something without any expectation of anything in return, that will give you something much more important. The return will be much more precious. When we do something without expecting anything in return, you get back something, it will be more precious. That is the mind slowly, mind will accumulate a spiritual element, spiritual quality. So some higher work, it could be volunteering for Vedanta society, it could be helping deserving people in your neighborhood, whatever may be. Something that should be for your good, because it brings this spiritual calmness, tranquility, a feeling, well, I have done something. I should have done that feeling. In fact, that helps your mind to become your friend. Otherwise, your mind finds very difficult to become your friend because you are not giving your mind what it wants. So, when we work expecting to serve naturally, all our normal activities, professions, will have something. We'll always expect something in return, naturally. But their mind is not getting any spiritual food. But if you can do something, not for your good, but for the good of others, then you are giving the mind some spiritual food, spiritual nutrition. And that will help your mind to become your friend. Yeah.
Swamiji, I want to thank you on behalf of Baldwin Wallace for coming here and sharing your wisdom. I also had a couple of questions that are related, but they're not the same.
Yeah, please.
The first one, so I can either ask them separately or ask them together, and
you can separate.
The first one concerns the point you had made yesterday about good actions.
Yeah.
And you were explaining how thoughts and actions are reciprocal, and normally we think, the usual positive thinking ideology is positive thinking will lead to positive actions, but you talked about positive actions as a way of actually changing the structure of one's thinking. One of the challenges there I have that I feel is about awareness, because it is in the absence of awareness, it is possible for people to be misguided and believe in the goodness of their actions that can have a very destructive effect. If your actions are driven by the selfish desire to think of yourself as good, then your good actions are likely to entrench the ego more than emancipate it.
Now here, there is a gradual evolution in even of the ego that really happens. Now, at the lowest level, we can think of a person who won't do anything good for anybody. At the lowest level, either for him or for anybody. At a still higher level, there are some people who will do a lot of good things if camera is focusing on them, or if they get some wide recognition, awards. Otherwise, they won't do anything. At a still higher level, there are those who will do good things for others without worrying about any recognition coming from anybody. So, and at the highest level, it becomes your natural, your inherent tendency, your character, your second nature to do always good things for others. You don't really worry, you don't even feel you are doing something good for others. What you do happens to be good for others. So the 4 levels. At the lowest level, that should be always avoided. See, the story is told, in fact, in the Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel is an interesting story. A teacher, guru, asked his disciple to bring some drinking water. And the disciple told him, no, I won't bring you drinking water because I will become so egoistic. I have brought you drinking water, so I will not give you drinking water. That's the lowest level. So, it's always better to do good, noble deeds, maybe beneficial for others, out of selfish motive, than doing nothing. And I can give one example. It's very, you read any newspaper, you can see that. Big captains of industry, businessmen with billions or trillions of dollars, after piling up huge wealth, then they feel a kind of inner urge, a psychological need to start a trust or a foundation to help earthquake victims or backward people in sub-Saharan countries, third world countries, Ebola victims. Actually, it is not that they become saints, not at all. What happens, when they selfish actions, but still following some moral principles, make them very wealthy, they reach a point where they can think of making use of their wealth, not for their own comforts, but for others. It may be that they want recognition. They may be expecting awards. Still, it's better than doing nothing. The same people, of course, it doesn't happen to them in this life. So, as I mentioned yesterday, Vedanta and Yoga always anticipate this continuing cycles of life. So, in the next life, according to Vedanta and Yoga, they say, great philosophers tell you, they are born again with the same tendency to do good deeds without any selfish motive. So there is a gradual evolution actually. So those who are born with such natural inherent tendencies to do good for others without any selfish motive, they have already gone through the early stages of evolution. You can, the reason why many of these rich people, they start these foundations or trusts for helping others, they want a little peace of mind. By doing that, they feel, well, I have done something. In fact, they are ready to spend a lot of money to get this inner peace and tranquility. But money or medicine cannot give that. Only their own good actions can produce this result. The result is invisible, but is intensely felt. That's what happens. Even if you help a person to cross the street, and without anybody watching that event, or if you give some help to some person without anybody becoming aware of it, after some time you feel, well, I have done something. Really, now, what is that feeling? What creates that feeling? That feeling is in the form of some inner tranquility and peace. And you find, when you do that, your mind actually feels a kind of inner poise and peace and tranquility. And one important sign that your mind is slowly turning to your friend, to be your friend, is that you feel this tranquility. When you are at home with yourself, there is a absence of any kind of inner friction or conflict. That's how mind shows its friendship or friendliness. That is in good terms with you.
I understand your point, but I see it differently because a lot of, for example, Cecil Rhodes, such a corrupt involvement in the diamond business and all of that. You plunder all your life, and then you start establishing a Rhodes Scholarship. If he did not establish the Rhodes Scholarship, there's a chance that he might have had to face his own guilt. And with that awareness, he would have evolved. What you're suggesting is he go do something, because that doing something will become the drug that will take care of his guilt.
I tell you, really speaking, what happens now? This man feels a psychological need to do something.
Is it not better that he not do it? Because
that's
if he
true.
does it, he will not
I
evolve.
agree that. But the point is, even that deed that he does in this life, Vedanta will tell you, when he is born again, even with a strong selfish motive, he may have done something which benefits some people. Even that little bit of action will produce a result, and is born with that minuscule mustard seed little fragment of good quality. That's what Vedanta. See, the Vedanta yoga psychology is so sharp and so focused. It says, even without you being aware of, or even if you do with totally negative motives, still if you do something which benefits others, it will produce some good thing. Not that all the evil consequences of your action will be washed away. Not at all. Not at all. What I want to drive home was the idea that actions will influence the mind.
Regardless of the awareness.
Yeah. Actions will benefit others. Not that it completely overturns the mental system or it neutralizes all the evil consequences of evil action. Not at all. I don't mean that. Please, not at all. What I mean to say, I was giving an example to what extent actions can influence the mind. That's it.
I really appreciate your answer, because that piece of awareness, I think that constitutes a philosophical divide between those who believe that awareness is a prerequisite.
Yeah, if awareness is there, the result will be much better. But if there is no awareness, still some result will be produced. Yeah.
But since the topic is mind as the worst enemy, my follow-up is, so there's one is about awareness, but take the president who initiated the war with Iraq.
Yeah.
He felt he was doing a very good thing.
Yeah.
And he felt, God spoke to him and told him to do this.
That's a different subject, I tell you. To be very frank, I am not in very good terms with the kind of God who speaks that way.
That's what
I believe it is a theological problem, which is beyond the scope of our discussion. It is a theological problem. You see, religion can be, or it can be a license for the most diabolical deeds and thoughts and ideas. If you before 20th century, most of the biggest bloodsheds took place in the name of religion on behalf of God. It was 20th century that produced, fascism, Nazism, and communism, which caused a lot of bloodshed. Before that, all the biggest battles and wars and genocides and massacres took place on behalf of God and for religion. That's a fact, no doubt about it. So what I was actually, remember when we were talking about yoga psychology yesterday, we were not talking about religion and God. God has absolutely no role in yoga philosophy, to be very frank with you. Second point, Vedanta also, a creator God has absolutely no role. Because I tell you, yoga psychology can never be compatible, can go along with the creator God concept, an anthropomorphic God, who is actually, he's so capricious and is so unpredictable. So most of the great agnostics, it's all, Richard Dawkins and many others, when they criticize religion, they are mostly criticizing the concepts of a creator God who creates this world and who divides humanity to conflicting, mutually warring groups of believers and non-believers, promising reward in the form of heaven for the believers and condemning others to hell. That's something. So yoga has nothing at all to do with this. Yoga is actually science. Yoga psychology is pure science. You should not bring in God there. It's an important point. But then, psychology and spirituality are intertwined, no doubt, because you have to begin with the psychological level. But the point I was making, if you want to have a perfectly healthy mind, you should go beyond psychology. You should go beyond psychological level. At the higher level, you can, when you go beyond mind, then mind becomes calm and quiet and your best friend. When you are at the mental level, mind is friendly now and not so very friendly next time. But when you go beyond mind, mind is always in a state of perfect happiness, contentment.
Thank thank you very much for your thoughtful answers.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone. I think officially or unofficially we'll close for now, but Swamiji is here and available and will be available this evening. Keep the conversation going. I was supposed to leave about 40 minutes ago, but I'm still here just because it's sort of like this, like he was describing.
This is not enough of it, right?
Yeah, my